In this section, we're going to be thinking about how we can improve your child's use of language with other children. And when I say use of language, this is what I referred to earlier as so that they use language to make requests or to make comments to other people, and to start getting that back and forth interaction with them. The first, this is for parents to consider, so they can be considering these strategies at home for play dates with other children or perhaps with their siblings at home, but also for settings to consider too. We need to first consider what play stage your child's up to in terms of their friendships and how they play. If your child is currently a child who likes to play by themselves, then the very first stage that we need to target is their ability to play alongside other people, because they're not going to be starting to talk to other people or interact or make friends with other children before they're playing alongside others and having people comfortable near them whilst they're playing. So if they are in a situation where they prefer to play on their own, there's certain things that we can think about to help them. Firstly, we might want to set up areas where there are places where they can play alongside each other, where they feel a little bit safer. The first thing you can do to do this is to develop well-defined spaces. So these would be secluded play areas where the child isn't in a big, noisy, loud environment, and they're much more likely to therefore play quietly alongside another child. And what I mean by a secluded area is an area like a tent or a cordoned off area where lots of people can't come rushing in and out. Might have a canopy over the top or something like that, which just makes it a little bit more private for just one or two people to come in. Another thing you can think about is groupings. So this might be having two chairs alongside a table to encourage just two people to sit there rather than encouraging lots of people to come over. It might also be worth thinking about having those chairs opposite each other so that the children can actually see each other and see what each other are doing, and they can be face to face. Another thing you can do is have duplicate toys. So this is where you would have two sets of toys facing each other at a table, or where you've got the two chairs opposite each other or on the floor. And where one child is playing with the toys, the other child can play with exactly the same things. And if they've got the same things, they're much more likely to look over at what the other child is doing and to notice them. And then they might start to share the toys or copy the play that they're doing alongside each other. So once they're at this stage where they're playing alongside each other and are starting to take an interest in what each other are doing, your child would be ready to receive some support to help them to talk to each other. As we said before, children can often find it easier to interact or talk with an adult rather than another child. So here are some ways an adult can help another child to interact with another child near them. So first of all, you can model comments about what other children are doing around them. This doesn't only just make the child more aware of what's going on around them, but also gives them the ideas of the sort of things that they can say. And the important thing to do after this is to wait to see what impact this has. So if we look at A as an example, your child would be playing alongside another child, and you can talk about something that the peer is doing or what they're looking at. So you could just say something like, oh, look, he's building something, or I think his tower is really great. So you're making a comment, or you're modeling a compliment that the child could use. So then you would say a comment like this, and then you would wait to see whether that causes the child to think about what the other child is doing, and then they might then keep the conversation going themselves. However, if it doesn't, you can then give them a bit more help. And this is where we do this looking at B. So get them thinking even more about what the peer is doing. So you could give them a little bit more help in getting them to think about what they could ask or what they could say. So saying something like, I wonder what they're building, or I think they're building. Or even you might want to just use a gesture to help them to notice that other child. So you might just go, building, or look, to help them just raise that awareness again of what the other child is doing. Again, wait to see if that has an impact. And if it doesn't, move on to C, which is to give an even more specific example of what they could do. So you could say, you could ask them what they're building. So you're providing them a bit of a choice maybe of something that they could do at this time. And if there still isn't a response from your child, you can actually model what they could say. So you could say to them, say, what are you building? Or say, I love your tower, and see whether this works in order to help them to know exactly what they need to say to the other child. And like I said, what's really important is that at each of these stages, you make the comment and then you wait to see what's happening. And what you'll often find is that if the child then does step in and use one of these strategies to get them going in the conversation, the other child will then likely pick up on this and then keep the conversation going. And that might help them out for a few turns. What's important is for you to watch that interaction, but step back from that interaction so that the child doesn't come back to you with any comments that they want to use, but actually says it to the other child instead. Because like we've said before, they're more likely to come to you if you're sat nearby. So it's important for you to physically move backwards, but then step back in again if you need to. Like I've said, the best ways of starting those interactions with other children is to make a comment about what the other child is doing, or to model how to use a compliment to the other child. So these strategies can be used to support that interaction with peers, but it can also help to start those conversations with you as well. A big example that I get from a lot of parents is that the child never wants to talk to them about what they've done or what they've been doing in school, and they'll come home and they'll say, what did you do today? And they'll say, I don't know, or I can't remember, which is a normal response for children when they get home from school. They either can't remember or they're finding those conversations hard. So you can use exactly the same methods to help your child to talk with you. So instead of asking that question about what they've been doing, you could instead talk to them about something you've been doing. So you could say something like, oh, I had a great lunch today, or I had a really great time today, and just see whether this sparks enough interest for your child for them to then say something back like, oh, who did you see? Or what did you have for your lunch? Or something like that. And if it doesn't, you can then say a bit more. So you could say, yeah, I had a really lovely sandwich for lunch today. And then make another comment maybe that will help them to think about what they've had for their lunch or what they could say. So I think you had a school dinner today, and then wait to see whether that helps to remind them of, oh yes, I did actually, I had sausages today. So it helps them to then make that conversation back to you. And again, if they're finding that hard, you can then give them the actual sentence that you might like them to say, such as, you could say, what was in your sandwich, mummy? Or you could ask me what was in my sandwich. Or you could tell me what you had for your lunch too. So these kinds of strategies are all about starting those initiating those interactions with other children, but also with adults, and it gives you a way of keeping those interactions going as well. Here's another example of this social coaching that I was talking about. So first of all, just talking about something that the peer is doing or saying. So, oh, look, he's colouring a picture. And if that doesn't get any response from the child, get them thinking more about what the other child is doing, saying, I wonder what they're colouring, I wonder what they're doing. And if that still doesn't work, give them more specific examples of what they could do or say. So you could ask them what they're colouring, or you could ask them what pen they're going to use next. And then lastly, you can then model exactly what you'd like them to say. So you could say, what are you colouring? Or would you like the pink pen? Just to help them keep going. And as you can see that you're using a tiered approach, or you're using strategies with an increasing amount of support, as it states here. So you're starting off with not giving them much help, but over time, you're giving them more and more help if they still need that. Another thing that an adult can do to keep that play or that interaction going is to give your child a specific role within that play while they're playing together. So if the play comes to a bit of a standstill, or they're not talking anymore, or it started to be that your child's just playing alongside the other child again, you can give them a specific role or a specific way that the child could get back into character or get back into that play again. So it's how they can contribute to that play. So for example, you could say, oh, perhaps he needs a red brick next, or maybe you've just found the treasure. Maybe you've just found the treasure, or you could be the scary dragon, or whatever. So you're giving that child a specific role to take, to give them those further ideas to extend that role play or that interaction with the other child. Once again, I'd like you to pause the video to consider the activities that your child likes to do and what they'd be happy to do alongside their peers. And then I want you to consider using this tiered approach, or increasing that level of support with your child, to first of all just say something to talk about, something that the peer is doing or what they're saying, and then think about what you then might do to give them more thinking time, or what you might say to consider what the other child is doing. Then give a more specific example of what they could do, and then model what they could say. So I want you to just write a bit of a script out as to the kinds of things that you could say to support them to initiate that interaction with another child. In this section now, we're going to be thinking about how we can provide other opportunities for children to use language for other reasons. So here is a simple example of something that we can do to help your child to make a request to another child. And the way we can do that is to really think about the equipment that there is around the child and around the other children that are there. So for example, in a group of 5, we could perhaps just have 2 pairs of scissors, or perhaps in just 2 people to start with, you would have them both doing their colouring, but perhaps only 1 pot of paint in each colour. And you want to make sure that the equipment is near the other child, so that the child has got a reason to ask the other child to pass it to them. So first of all, we need to just sit and watch that interaction and wait for your child to realise that they need that item, rather than just stepping in to help them. And as adults, we will often do this to help our children out. We'll say, oh, look, I can see you need the pink paint. Here's the pink paint, rather than waiting for the child to actually realise they need it, and then also realise or have that thinking time to think about what they need to do. So once the child has realised that they need it, it might be that they ask you for the item rather than the other child, because they're much more likely to talk to adults than the other children. So just as we talked about that sequence of events before, we would do a really similar thing. So we would start by just stating that we don't have them. We don't have the scissors, or we don't have the paint. So if the child says, I don't have the pink paint, or can you give me the pink paint? You could just say, oh, I don't have the pink paint. He has the pink paint. And if the child doesn't respond, again, you're giving a more specific example of what they could do. So you could ask him for the scissors and then wait. And again, if more help is needed, you can model what you want them to say in a very exact way. So you could say, John, please, can I have the scissors? So you're giving them exactly the words that they need to say to make that request. And within the activities, the adults should also take part in them so that they can model the phrases to use. So while you're playing all together, you can be doing that modeling of, oh, John, I need some scissors. Please, can I have some scissors? And if you say this lots of times, then your child will start to get what they need to say in order to get their items. At this point, I just want to talk a bit about the evidence around supporting children and young people with social communication difficulties. The evidence says that there's a range of intervention approaches in terms of supporting children with their social interaction and their social communication difficulties, but there isn't evidence that just one approach is more effective than another approach. And a lot of parents or people at schools or nurseries will ask about social skills groups to support children. What we know from evidence is that social skills groups can be effective to teach specific social communication skills. So, for example, you could talk to them about making compliments to people, or you can support children to make requests, for example, in a group, or talk about how we can greet people and the kinds of things that we can say. So we can learn that within a social skills group. But what we tend to find with a social skills group is that a child can use those skills within that room, within those people, but they still don't use those skills within everyday situations. And that's why, as part of what all of this training has been about, it's been about supporting your child to use these skills within their play that they're doing already, or within those everyday situations that you have with your child. And they're much more likely to then use those skills themselves in different situations, because you've modeled them in a real situation that has happened with them. If you feel that you would like a bit more support in terms of how you can teach your child about these kinds of social communication skills, we do have this specific program that we can talk through with you and send out to you, both for using at your settings, but also at home as well, if you wanted to carry it out. And in this particular program, there are more ideas in terms of how you can support your child to initiate an interaction with another child, how they can respond to other children, how they can make comments or ask questions, and also provide play suggestions within those interactions. And each of the session plans for each of those phases, which it says there, it contains a social story, which is a story about how the skill can be used, and it gives you ideas of how you can practice each of those skills. So, for example, you can do it through role play, or you can watch two people, two adults or two children practicing this skill together for your child to watch. And then it gives them opportunities to practice in role play, either with toys or with other people themselves, to have a go at each of these skills. So if you do feel that this particular program would give you some further ideas, please do get in touch with us and we can send that out to you. So here's the end of this part 3. So I'm going to finish this here, and please open the next section, which talks a little bit more about developing friendship skills.